I appreciate the song that Steve led. He didn't know what I was preaching on, but it would just fit in with Where the Roses Never Fade. That's such a beautiful song. Here in Ecclesiastes chapter 3 and verses 1 and 2, a rather familiar verse in that it says, to everything there is a season, and every time, and a time to every purpose under the sun. Then verse 2 says, a time to be born and a time to die. And so we begin with the birth and we end with death. I've heard it said that the cradle and the casket stand side by side, in the sense that when we're born, that we immediately begin to head toward death, and that's the truth. And so in between is what we call life. And Hebrews 9 verse 27 reminds us that it is appointed unto man once to die, and after this, the judgment. Now that's serious, death and judgment. It's a given. It's going to happen. Two things that will happen, death and the judgment. In Matthew 25 verse 46, and these shall go away into everlasting punishment, that the righteous into life eternal. There again, the two possibilities, everlasting punishment, or we have a choice to make it life eternal. One we would call heaven, the other we call hell. And so this morning we are studying what I'm calling a contrast or contrasting heaven and hell. I'm hoping that the pictures that we paint in this study will make a choice so simple, so easy, so obvious that there's no one in the audience would dare to choose hell over heaven. So let's look at the two sides of the equation. First, there's a contrast of light and darkness. Heaven is a place of eternal light. And so the city had no need of sun, a description of the city in Revelation chapter 21, verse 23. The city had no need of the sun, neither of the moon to shine in it, for the glory of God did lighten it, and the Lamb is the light thereof. Now notice then, in this city we're talking about of heaven, the source of the light will be the glory of God the Father. You remember that even when Moses tried to approach the Mount Sinai, that the glory of God was so powerful he had to put a veil on his face, unless his eyes, I suppose, would have been blinded. And so in heaven the light will come from God, and the Lamb, which is Christ, will be the source of the light. And there shall be no night there. Again, a description in Revelation 22:5. There will be no night there. There will be no need for a candle, neither light from the sun. For the Lord God, again, gives them light, and they shall reign forever and ever. And so the picture we get of heaven here is a place of eternal light. And remember, we equate lightness with goodness, darkness with evil. God is light. In Him there is no darkness at all. One eternal day then, one eternal day, constant light. And if you think about it, if there were no sunset and sunrises, every day here would be a constant too. And so in heaven there's a constant. There's no sunset, no sun rising. There's always sun or light. And so you have one eternal day there. In contrast, hell is described as outer darkness. And cast ye the unprofitable servant into outer darkness, where there shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Now notice that phrase. We'll see it again a little later. Weeping and gnashing of teeth in this place of darkness. And in Jude 13 is described as the blackness of darkness forever. And I think we've all been in a situation where you talk about this pitch black, that it's just so dark you just feel it out there. Well, that's what hell will be like. It'll be total darkness. If it were nothing more than that, I'd want to avoid it, wouldn't you? But the blackness of darkness forever is the way it's described in Jude, verse 13. Now, another contrast between heaven and hell is the access to the tree of life versus in hell, there's access to no blessings. In the Revelation letter, chapter 2, verse 7, he who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. To him who overcomes, I will give to eat of the tree of life. Tree of life, which is in the midst of the paradise of God. Now remember that when Adam and Eve sinned, they were deprived of access to the tree of life and were cast out of the garden. They could have eaten and lived forever. And they were expelled from the garden. You and I are born outside the garden and never had access to it. But in a sense, we will have access to that tree of life when we get to heaven. In the midst of the paradise of God. Just sounds exciting, doesn't it? In contrast, in hell, there will be no tree of life. There will be no blessings in hell. Everlasting destruction is the way it's described will be awaiting us if we should end up there from the presence of the Lord. Everlasting destruction. On the other hand, remember James 1:17 says, every good gift and every perfect gift is from above. And look at the contrast. That's which comes from above is that beautiful place where we'll have access to the tree of life. That place that does not ascend from above, but described in the Bible as hell, is everlasting destruction from the presence of the Lord, if we can imagine such a terrible concept. Everlasting destruction. Another contrast is that in heaven we'll be around and access to the throne of God, where in hell there will be the abode of the devil. And there shall be no curse, description of heaven, but there be the throne of God, and of the Lamb shall be in it, and his servants shall serve him. Now, let's envision then heaven as a place that is the throne of God. Christ will be there too, and we'll have access to the throne of God. Now, contrasting that, on the other hand, not this majesty and not this throne, but in Matthew 25:41, then shall he say to them that are on the left, remember the sheep and goat, one on the left, the goats, and the right are the sheep. And he'll say to those on the left, those that are not saved, depart from me, ye cursed, into everlasting fire. And here's the shivering part. It's prepared for the devil and his angels. That was the reason it was prepared, but it's also going to be the place that will be shared by all those unprepared to meet God when they die. A place with the devil and his angels. Can you imagine spending an eternity with the devil and his angels forever and ever and ever and no escape from it? Not appealing at all, is it? And so there, not the throne of God that we'll have access to, but we'll be able to be with the devil and his angels if we do not end up in heaven forever and ever. Not appealing. Another contrast is there's no curse in heaven, but in hell all are the cursed. And there shall be no more curse, but the throne of God and of the Lamb shall be in it, and his servants shall serve him. No curse in heaven. Then shall he say to them on the left, now this is a contrast, depart from me, ye cursed, into everlasting fire prepared for the devil and his angel. And so curse, we know what a curse is. It's something placed on someone who has the power to do it. And the devil, so to speak, places curse upon the wicked, and they are the cursed. That is, they're going to suffer penalty for disobedience forever and ever and ever in the devil's hell, where there is everlasting fire. So says the Bible. Another contrast the Bible makes is rest versus no rest. The rest will be in heaven. Blessed are the dead which die in the Lord from henceforth. Now that is, once they die in the Lord, henceforth they'll be blessed. Yea, saith the Spirit, that they may rest from their labors, and their works do follow them. There's something beautiful about rest. I was telling Liz this morning, one of the advantages of getting older, I have learned to to enjoy rest so much. What a wonderful blessing rest is, to sit and just relax and rest. Have you thought about that? And the second thing I told Liz this morning, have you thought about, and it's similar to it, sleep. Isn't sleep the most wonderful, soothing, comforting thing there is? And rest. What a wonderful feeling that is. In heaven there'll be rest.